What is happening, everyone? It's Coach Ishak with HawkFit Coaching and Legion Athletics and your host for today's episode of Anabolic Radio. I'm joined today by the Godfather, Jeff Alberts, who is a coach at Team 3DMJ, 3D Muscle Journey. If you guys heard the podcast with Alberto Nunez, you should already be sort of familiar with them. He's also a father, husband, coach, and he's been a lifetime drug-free bodybuilder for 34 years now, which is longer than some of us have been alive. So Jeff has been someone who's made such a huge impact on my journey in regards to his philosophies, in regards to a lot of his teachings and how he approaches the practicality when it comes to bodybuilding and really integrating it as part of your life. Jeff recently competed this past year in 2019. He did a total of 5 shows, I believe it was.
7 total.
7 total shows. 7 total shows. As a natural athlete, that's quite an accomplishment. And him still doing this at this level, him still bodybuilding and competing at this level, and being he has a great physique. I think is world-class physique. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get this discussion started. Jeff, how are you this morning?
I'm good. Hey, after that, man, podcast over. I appreciate the nice words, and hopefully 34 years we could maybe help some people out.
Of course, man. Thank you for, waking up really early and coming on. But in regards to your contest prep, your last contest prep, the one in 2019, the one you recently did, what was one of the most enjoyable parts about it all?
I would say, just letting Sam know that Grandpa was here on stage, So, Sam being one of the more elite natural bodybuilders out there, and for someone my age coming off a 5-year layoff and having some struggle getting back to the stage because of injuries and things like that, and being a family man, it is a little bit more challenging, to contest prep. So, when I got on that Mayhem stage, that first show of the season, and when I got the call out, hey, I forget what my number was, but hey, number so-and-so, stand next to Sam. It was like, okay, I've arrived. I'm here again. So just like I wanted to have some fun with it. And I'm like, all right, just looked up at Sam and said, hey, Grandpa's here. And, of course, got a laugh out of it. And it's those things that at this point in my career that I really love about competing is just sharing it with some good guys on stage, getting to know them better, and sharing it with my family. So yeah, it was a great season, and I had no regrets on doing that many shows.
Looking forward to another season next year.
Hell yeah, man! I'm in the gym off season, full beast mode, and
I see you.
People
in the
want to tell me, "Oh, you're 48, you can't make gains. Your physique's tapped out." I'm like, nope, we'll see. We'll show you. So in the gym, working hard, and we'll be back in 21, and we'll step on Sam's other foot.
Yeah, guys, if you aren't following Jeff on Instagram, go ahead and give him a follow. He always drops some really valuable gems in regards to just the entire bodybuilding approach and nutrition and training. And what I really love about his training is he gets shit done with the bare minimum, and he doesn't overcomplicate it. And right now, specifically, we're January 2020, January 18, 2020. Me and Jeff feel like we have had discussions before we started this, but like as a beginner or someone who's in their intermediate stage of their level of advancement, it's very common to, let's say, scroll on Instagram or social media or look something up about bodybuilding or natural bodybuilding or fitness and nutrition and training, and to get bombarded with so much overcomplicated shit that makes it so hard for you to see the big picture in regards to what you need to be focusing on to be successful in your own journey. And without further ado, Jeff, one thing I really love about you is the practicality of how you approach all of this.
That comes with being in the gym for as long as I have, right? And doing so many contests preps, you start to really understand, what's important as far as, the real nuts and bolts of it. And like you said, it's big picture. And I think sometimes a lot of us, especially when we're new to the sport, if we are getting flooded, with daily content, it's like, I can't remember when bodybuilding's moved that fast as far as our progress. Like, things don't move daily, but the flood of information is coming in daily. So it's hard to decipher what is something I can actually take and use versus, okay, what needs to be tossed out. So when you're new to the sport, you don't know. So it's hard to filter out some of that stuff, but the more experience you get, it's easier to filter that stuff out. And I don't like to, I know when people follow me, they think like, oh, Jeff's like a minimalist. Like, look, he's only doing, like yesterday I did 6 sets for back. Like, oh, wow, how can he improve with just 6 sets of back? Science right now, the research right now is saying, hey, we need like upwards of 10 to 20 sets, per week or whatever. But if you look a little bit deeper into it, it's not that I'm trying to be a minimalist or trying to do is like get away with doing less. It's I'm become more efficient with my process. So for me personally nowadays, like the information that's coming in, I mean, yeah, I'll look at it and I can do a good job of filtering, but it's more I look internally as far as how do I master myself? How do I tick? I think a lot of times because we're looking externally, we're basically like not realizing that we need to look internally more so, if that makes sense. So they think about the science and all that's coming in. It's great because it helps us get into the ballpark. Like, okay, yeah, 10 to 20 sets, whatever. Okay, great. There's some guidelines there. But once you start applying it, that's where you need to realize, okay, I'm playing the game now. I need to realize, okay, what makes me tick, what works well, what doesn't work well, and then start filtering on yourself. Keep what does work and throw out what doesn't. And that's becoming more efficient. So my process is like, it's gotten more and more efficient over the years. So my 3 sets of rows now, I can make that feel like 10 sets of rows, someone else's 10 sets.
1,000%.
And I've talked to like a lot of individuals on Skype with coaching, and it's like often I'm actually chopping people's like volume down and things like that, because once I start having a one-on-one conversation with somebody, you start realizing like, okay, this person's doing 7 exercises in a given workout. They're doing upwards of like 4 and 5 sets per exercise. I'm like, okay, that's 28 to 35 sets for that workout. Like, I guarantee
it's a lot of
I guarantee they're holding back because they know, okay, I have 3 or 4 more exercises to do. And it's usually the case. Do you find yourself fatiguing towards the end? Are you holding yourself back? And typically the question gets answered with a yes. So it's like, okay, let me downsize that. And you think about too, like a lot of people's real life doesn't jive with being in the gym for 3 hours or 2 hours. So if you got to think about a time component too in people's real world situations. So again, I think sometimes too, when we look at social media content, remember we're humans and we're not in a lab unless you're just blessed that you don't have no life stress going on. Like you have a perfect world where, you could be devoted to being in the gym 2 or 3 hours a day. And, you don't have a responsibility with family and school, work, that type of stuff. But most people, it's like you have to dive deeper and see and try to, like I said, you try to have to become more and more efficient with your flow.
Efficiency. That's one thing that you really drive home that I absolutely love. A lot of people, they think low volume is like 3 sets or, for a given movement. And what they don't really understand is that like this all comes back to foundations in regards to really mastering your execution in a movement, really mastering your technique, having a high degree of intent, like just controlling a movement. Like some of this seems like common sense, right? But it's not. Common sense wouldn't be so common if everyone had it. If you're not controlling your reps and sets, you're not controlling the effectiveness of your training. That's going to lead you to, think you have these lagging muscle groups, for example, and you have to throw. And a lot of people think the remedy for that is throwing more volume at that muscle group, more sets, add in more sets. I need to drive my sets up.
Well, if your quality is terrible with 3 sets and you're not getting the development out of that, like you said, it's like, okay, then like you said, a lot of people's solution is, hey, let me do more work, more sets. Well, now all of a sudden you go from 3 shitty sets to now 5 shitty sets. And if the quality or your form, let's say, is not that great, and it's put you in a situation where maybe your risk for injury is elevated. Well, now you're elevating that even more by doing 3 shitty sets. Now you're doing 5. And also if you factor in, okay, if you're adding more volume in, okay, you better make sure your recovery is on point. You're eating enough, and things like that. So it can kind of like snowball, like your issues become even more snowballed. So it's like, if you go back, okay, ask the question, root cause, like, why am I not progressing? Okay, it might be just a quality issue. Improve, like you said, improve your foundation, the basics, improve your form. That's priority. Because one, it ensures you're targeting the muscle the way it should be targeted. So you're getting its effective volume, right? Like you're doing it correctly. You're moving point A to point B in a solid way. The muscle that's intended to work is working. And you'll start to realize, like, okay, I am progressing in the right way. And two, you're keeping yourself a little bit safer. So someone like me who's been training for 30-something years, that right there for me is always priority is form. I never try to do more volume, more load, or more sets, if my form is not where it should be, because the risk for injury is elevated. And it's just, I'm spending more time in the gym when I don't need to be. So it's important, like you said, to have that quality as a priority. So a beginner shouldn't be, in my opinion, should be focused on how many sets I should be doing. It's more focused on, I need to move correctly in the gym. I need to make sure I'm doing these exercises correctly. Don't worry about progress and development. It'll come. That's just a byproduct of having that quality. So it's with anything in bodybuilding. You should focus more on process and make sure it's freaking on point before you try to overload that process, if that makes sense.
That makes so much sense. That makes a lot of sense. And for those of you listening, this is something, you may have potentially heard come up in multiple episodes already. And that's just because this is something that you can't ignore. And the reality is, if you really want to make long-term progress, you need to ensure that these foundations are in place. Otherwise, let's say, for example, when you increase load on an exercise, you're potentially getting yourself closer to either developing an injury or you're getting less of an effective training stimulus. And the reality is, you have to also be practical with things, right? Especially when it comes to progression. And typically what I tell a lot of my clients who just start out with me, it's important for you to decrease your training load at least 20 to 25% the first 1 to 3 weeks. Learn the movement patterns, understand how to perform the movement with the right technique. And once we know the quality is there, we could start to progress through other training variables, that being, either load, reps, sets, intensity, so on and so forth. And when it comes to progression in the gym, Jeff, what are some foundations that you use in order to help your decision-making process, or in order to guide your decision-making process?
So it depends on the exercise, right? Like, obviously, if let's say we're doing a lateral, I'm not going to be focused on trying to increase loads. It's more like, okay, let me try to increase reps. And you have to realize, like, a movement like that, it's not going to move all too much over the years. Like, I've been using the same load for laterals for like 20, 30 years now. Like, okay, 20, 30 pound dumbbells. So it's just more or less, okay, let me see if I can improve my reps over time, and realize that. So first, here's a good I guess way to talk about progression without getting like too into details, like more big picture. Like often we don't want to look at like, okay, what did I do session to session? Like sometimes you can do that, at first you might be able to move load or whatever, or reps or sets initially, but over time that it's hard to decipher your progress week to week. You have to take a step back and look at through an even bigger window. Okay, what did I do last month versus this month? Or even a step further. Okay, what did I do this 6 months this 6 months versus last 6 months? So like in an exercise, let's say such as a row or something like that, like your loads aren't going to move every week or whatever. But if you're moving, let's say 10 or 15 pounds more, like each time, like you're working, let's say 215 pounds on an exercise for 6 months straight. But the 6 months prior, you were doing, let's say 180, 190. So you factor in, okay, that's 6 months with that load, 6 months with this load. It's more volume over time. But see, people, like, this is in general, when they look at bodybuilding, they look too much through these little windows. And that's where the insecurities come up. And that's where, like, once your insecurity starts to get elevated, that's when we make bad decisions, because we're letting like unguided emotions take over. So that's where sometimes we're like, oh shit, my load's not going up, I'm going to increase it every week. They force it. And that's where that bad form comes in. That's where injuries come in. But if they take a step back and they like basically, again, make sure their form is on point, be patient, and realize that over time, you're going to get better and better and better. It's just, you have to have trust in that process.
Trust the process. You big picture guys, most people out there consuming a lot of this content aren't competitive athletes with timetables. That's the most important thing. So if you feel like the quality of your work isn't there, it probably makes more sense to lower your volume, move a little bit slowly over time. And once you know that the quality is there, you can start to progress like through these other training variables. And also part of it too is like the practicality of the exercise, right? Progression through the practicality of the exercise is everything. So for example, like a RDL, it probably makes more sense to increase load and reps over, let's say, sets, right? Or for a dumbbell curl, it probably makes more sense to increase your reps and sets over your load, because it's an isolation movement. Like, you're going to be limited in terms of how much load you can move.
Exactly. Yeah, RDL. I mean, if you do, 5, 6, 7 sets in RDL, you're not going to be able to walk for a couple of days. You're going to have a lot of DOMs because the eccentric on that is taxing. So yeah, practically it makes more sense. Hey, I can probably bump loads up a little more frequently, and maybe shoot rep range up or down, whatever you need to do there. But that's such a, I don't want to say it's risky, like scaring people. That's a risky movement, but it is a more technical movement. So you have to definitely like be more in tune with your quality, especially on those bigger compound lifts where, if you did have to put a percentage on it, I would probably guess that like those injuries, you see more injuries on those big compounds than you do on the smaller ones. So yeah, you need to make sure your form and technique is where it needs to be. But like I said, it comes down to practicality. That's how I see things when I'm in the gym. It's more based off of practicality on my circumstances versus like, hey, latest research says, hey, we need this many sets, or we need to be in this rep range or whatever, or my reps in reserve need to be here. It's more like, I might be able to say, okay, let me see if I can apply that, which I did. So personally, I did that before my last prep. I had like a little 6-month off season. So I was like, all right, I'm going to basically try to systemize volume. So like, I'm going to go, as far as sets. So week 1, I'm going to do 3 sets, week 2, 4, week 3, 5, and then deload. So typical, hey, let's structure this volume this way. It's pretty common. You see that. And what I realized with me personally is that some of those 3-set weeks where it was like, on paper, it's less intense. It's kind of building up to the high volume. It would be like, I felt fucking great. And I'm like, okay, here I am feeling great, but I'm holding myself back because the volume's so low, because that's what's written in a spreadsheet. And then there was some weeks where I'm in the 5-set week where I'm just like, man, I'm like clobbered with work. I got, life stuff going on. I don't have as much time in the gym, but on the spreadsheet says I have to do 5 sets. So of course, when you're doing 5 sets versus 3 sets, it's going to take a lot longer to complete the work in the gym. So I was getting even more fatigued. So I got life stress, and now I got like stress in the gym because I'm trying to rush through my training to get all this stuff in because I have X, Y, and Z to get to once I'm done with the gym. So I just realized that like this is kind of doesn't work for me. And with a lot of athletes that I've worked with, it's kind of holds true with a lot of them as well. It's like I said, we're not living in a lab, a controlled lab. So we're real humans. So to me, it just made sense. Like, hey, if I have like a week of work where, let's say my client load is a little lower and I have more time in the day and I have good sleep and I'm eating well, let's attack. Like, even if let's do more here. And if it's a week where my sleep isn't all that great, or maybe diet's a little off and just, just not feeling that energized, that's not a good time to do a ton of volume because you're just going to elevate stress even more and fatigue even more. So basically what I've realized was like, I need to use my experience level to my advantage. And that's basically auto-regulation. So with the way I work athletes, it's like, yeah, we can start with a system. Let's say, hey, let's do a 3-set, 4 sets, 5-set deload. Like start with a structure, start with a system. But once an athlete goes through that a little while, they start realizing what is more practical for their life. Does it work well? Does it not work well? And eventually my goal as a coach is to get an athlete from being like rigid, right? Because you have to start an athlete on the rigid side to where I'm at now, where I know how to basically make those judgment calls. And to me, in my opinion, what separates a beginner, intermediate, and advanced is not so much how much book smarts they have or anything like that. It's more like about mastering yourself and making those judgment calls. So that's kind of a long-winded answer, but yeah.
No, that was an awesome answer. I'm sure a lot of people will be able to take away some great points from that. And a lot of it too, guys, is just time, like experience and time. You learn more through time. You learn more through experience. And if you don't know what the hell you're doing, there are resources out there to help you out, whether that be coaching. Doesn't have to be me, doesn't have to be Jeff, but if you go with
yes, it does.
Yeah, guys, like big picture, there's resources out there to help you if you don't know what you're doing. And if you're in the beginner or even intermediate stages of your level of advancement, you also have to consider the personal side of things in regards to your lifestyle and how well you can integrate training and nutrition and being on top of those variables as part of your life. And is stressing about all this minutia adding to the stress in your life, or is it decreasing it? Bodybuilding, training, nutrition, like taking advantage and, taking care of your health and improving your body composition first and foremost is a privilege. And, big picture of things.
So my thought is like, if bodybuilding causes more stress in your life versus creating more enjoyment in your life, approach needs to change. So if you're basically trying to overcomplicate it or overanalyzing it, which that often happens with a lot of people, and sometimes it's their own fault, sometimes not, because like I said, we're getting a daily flood of information. So a lot of times if you don't know what's what, you see, oh, I just saw a post on this split. Oh shit, maybe I should be doing that. Then all of a sudden they jump ship from what they were doing. They go to that one. The next day they see someone else say, hey, shit, this split. So now they jump ship again. Like they're all over the place. And to me, it's like, I simplify it. Like people look at my splits and they're like, oh God, this guy doesn't do anything. And it looks like this guy's working out with a beginner program. And yeah, you could say it is a beginner program, but you know why I'm advanced is because I made that beginner program advanced through my efficiency, my quality. Like if on paper you can put, I want you to do 3 sets by 10 reps, right? And then you can put it again, so let's say a year later, 3 sets by 10 reps. Same thing, but I almost guarantee you your 3 by 10 a year later is going to be far more effective and efficient a year later than it is in the first year.
Facts.
Because one, especially if you're like, okay, I'm going to make 3 by 10. The only thing I'm going to focus on is form. I'm going to make 3 by 10 look perfect. Eventually, once your movement quality is there, then when you do increase load, so that's how I progress. Like you asked me earlier how I progress. Let's say it's a 3 by 10 on a curl. 3 by 10, let's say it's 100 pounds. 3 by 10, 100 pounds. Did I complete all 3 sets? Yes or no? Great, I did. Yes. Okay. Now was form 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10? Because I won't increase my load unless things look like it's on point. Like there's no momentum, no leveraging. Like I'm not trying to lean back and just use momentum. If that all checks out, okay, I'll bump the load up. Okay, let's go 5 pounds heavier next time. And again, I'll just go through the check marks, and you have to naturally, like I might say, okay, now the 3 by 10 might be a 3 by 9 now because load goes up. So I kind of set a rep range on my movements. So let's say it's a 8 to 10 rep range for barbell curls. So I'll just work my loads up, and as long as I'm in that, hitting at least 8s across the board, and getting like perfect form, then okay, job well done, right? So then it's like, okay, let me maybe go back up to 10s again and see if I can use a little bit heavier load from the first time I did it. So it would be 100 in that case. So let's say it's 105 now where I'm shooting for 10s. But never do I try to sacrifice form for load. So again, over time, if I do that over time, 100 pounds for 3 months, whatever, and then now 3 months after that, I'm working with 110. And then so on and so on. That's how you basically make progress. You're just consistent. You have good quality the whole time. I don't need to have like, this fancy program or fancy spreadsheet to make progress. Like I can keep the same beginner program that I have and make it efficient over time. That makes sense.
That makes total sense. And to switch gears a little bit, I wanted to specifically...
Come on, man. It's 7:45 in the morning. I'm trying my best to sound eloquent, and now you're switching gears. But that's okay. We'll take another sip of coffee.
Yes. So I specifically wanted to hear about your approach in regards to the adjustments you make to your training as you get deeper into prep. Because I know specifically for me, I had to, restructure my mesocycles to a little bit shorter mesocycles so I could deload more frequently, like let's say 4-week mesocycles. Before, like right now, my mesocycles are structured into 6 weeks. And that's just because, I'm deeper in my off season. Like my recovery is so high right now. Food is high right now. We're good in regards to progression. And
big picture, right? Big picture, supply and demand. So right now you're off season, more food's coming in. Of course, when you got more body fat on you, you're going to sleep better, like everything. So your supply is now up here and your demand is not as high either. So your supply is probably outweighing your demand. So yeah, it makes sense that you can probably deload less frequently. Whereas deep into a prep, when your calories are low, body fat is low, the overall stress is elevated because we are in that deficit. So, and sleep is usually fucked up for a lot of us at that point. Demand is like, way up here, but your supply isn't. Your supply is down here because your food level is lower because you're trying to get shredded. So yeah, it makes more sense that you would probably need, more frequent deloads. So again, taking a step back and looking at big picture, like how do we make muscle gain? Well, put yourself in an environment to do so. That means, okay, your body comp needs to not look like you're shredded, obviously. So you need to have some energy on your body. You need to be eating a lot more food, and you need to just make sure your rest is there and sleep is there. And flip side, it's the opposite, when you're getting shredded. So it's like you got to think about all of it. In my opinion, big picture, bodybuilding is managing supply and demand. That's all it is. So whether it's on the micro level or a big picture level, that's all what you should be focusing. Like for me, it's like even like the small, like you asked about, like deep into prep, how I manage things. Like let's say it's a shitty night of sleep and I wake up, I'm just tired. And, let's say by the time it's time to train and I'm not feeling decent, like to me, it's like, okay, you know what? It might be better for me to take a rest day here. So let's take an auto-regulated deload, right? Let's just take a rest day and let's see if I can get some good sleep tonight. And of course, maybe, I feel better the next day. Well, chances are my performance will be better with a little more rest. So you might get a little bit more volume that way because you're moving a little bit more load. Maybe you're able to get a couple more reps. Maybe your form is going to be better off because you're not struggling as much, so you're not going to cheat and things like that. So
or PR.
Yeah. So that's basically how I do things. It's like I think about supply and demand, like what makes the most sense from that perspective, and that usually helps me to make the right judgment calls. Because again, if I'm just going to be what I call like a prisoner to a spreadsheet, like, yeah, it's great to have this spreadsheet. It's a guide. That's how I see it. It's just a guide. It's not hard rules. But if I'm a prisoner to it, then, I mean, what are you really learning about yourself if you're just following something that's on paper, regardless of everything you're experiencing outside of it? So, and people are fearful too. Like if I deviate from the spreadsheet, oh shit, I'm not going to progress as much, or it's just going to be a mistake or something. Like, what's the worst that can happen if you screw up a little bit? Like, as long as you're not being unsafe, right? Like, of course, if it's going to be hazardous, of course, don't do it. But it's kind of like I think about it like with my kids. Like if they're going to do something that I think, oh, they might get hurt a little bit here, and you stop them every single time. What does that teach them? It teaches them that, oh, I need mommy or daddy to tell me what to do all the time. But if I let my kid like fall down and scrape his knee a little bit, well, shit, he's gonna know like, oh, okay, yeah, maybe I shouldn't do that again. That hurt. So sometimes I think like as a coach, especially, it's like I allow my athletes to experience things on their own, to make mistakes, because that reinforces what works well and what doesn't. But sometimes, again, we'll talk about the social media stuff. There's a flood of content out there. So it's almost like you're almost like a baby bird, right? Like, a mama bird feeds the babies, and your baby bird with your mouth open, feed me, feed me, feed me. That's how I kind of see the people following social media like when they follow these people, like they're the mama bird, like trying, okay, feed me. It's like, fuck, sometimes go find your own food, And hey, if it takes you 3 days to find some food instead of like 1 minute, you're gonna learn. You're gonna grow more as a person, not just a bodybuilder. So, but yeah, I think I'm tired. I'm kind of grumpy. I'm like ranting a little bit, huh?
No, it's good. These are good rants. It makes for great listening.
But yeah, just deep into my prep. That's how I adjust like my training. Like I don't systemize deloads for me personally. For my athletes, if I'm talking as a coach, for my athletes, I'm like kind of like what you do, like every 4 or 5 weeks there's a scheduled deload in there, because fatigue does elevate quite a bit for the reasons that we talked about earlier. You're obviously dieting, you're lean, you're tired, so you're not going to have the same energy as you would off season. But I also tell that same thing for my athletes. Hey, if you're experiencing a lot of fatigue before week 4 or week 5, I want to know about it. I want to help you make a decision to, hey, maybe we need to take an early deload, or hey, let's take an extra day off or 2 extra days off. Because again, if we bring overall demand down, supply is going to go up. You're going to perform better after that. You're going to be more productive after that. So it's the same concept with like diet breaks too. Diet breaks thrown in there to alleviate a lot of that demand, so you can progress better over the long haul.
Big picture, guys, big picture. And when it comes to exercise selection, I know this is going like in the deep end real quick, but I just love how specifically with your contest prep, you made those quick adjustments off the top of your head in regards to what exercises are you able to switch up and come up with a variation for in regards to, let's say, your supply and demand based on how you're feeling, based on how deep you were in contest prep, based on what you experienced?
So I'm not perfect. So I made a mistake. Like I was running RDLs for a good while through my prep. So I went from deadlift to RDL. So I'm like, okay, deadlifts are pretty damn demand. They're hard, like real hard. RDL is a little bit easier for me to do and to recover from. So I made that switch. And then as the prep unfolded, I got really good at becoming really efficient with RDL. Like I was doing I got up to 435 for 5 on RDL while dieting down.
Yeah.
So I kept it at 3 sets the entire time and just like I talked about earlier, just slowly kind of built the load up, kept form on point. Well, when you get leaner and leaner and leaner, your leverages are, they become more and more you're at a disadvantage. And just that one session where, my body was like, what are you doing? And I tore my upper pec, from so much force being pulled down. I tore my upper pec. It was a slight tear, thankfully. But it changed things. So it's like, obviously I couldn't do RDL anymore. So it was kind of, I learned the hard way, right? Get injured. Okay. Now, it forces me to change. I wasn't going to quit the prep. I wanted to keep it going. So, Eric Helms was, we were kind of going back and forth, coach athlete. And he's like, hey, let's maybe go to hyperextension or something like that. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. So I started doing hyperextension, and, of course I could hold the dumbbell up to my chest, like, with my arms close to me versus having an RDL and my arms are hanging. So I was able to do that. And if you think about a hyperextension, it works the same musculature pretty much as an RDL, hamstring, glutes, low back. So as long as I execute that exercise properly, where I'm driving my hips into the pad and making sure that I'm firing my hamstrings, my glutes, then I'm basically kind of, matching things up, and the volume was roughly the same, intensity is roughly the same. So I'm covered. So that was like one of those changes I made. And then the other change was that because I tore my upper pec, I couldn't do any flat pressing. So, so it wasn't a question of, wasn't like my glass wasn't half empty. It was half full. Okay. So the question was, what can I do? So I was able to do a decline Smith bench off of pins. So my range of motion went from like full range of motion to like half. And of course, people are going to look at that and go, oh shit, you're losing out on volume now. But if you think about it, the muscles are still working, even though it's less range of motion, and it just reset a baseline. So the only thing that's going to, in my mind, is going to like create true atrophy is if we stop training, right? Like a lot of people fear like, if I don't do this, and this perfectly, or if I don't do these certain exercises or this certain full range of motion, I'm not going to make as much progress. Maybe. But if you're injured and you can't do it or anything like that, or you just stop training altogether, that's what creates atrophy. It's like you stop training altogether. So anybody listening to this, like if you're stressing on progress, stop training for a month, and then you'll wake up and go, oh, okay, yeah, I was okay. I was okay, man. It's like if I stop training, then obviously, I'm start shrinking. So long story short, I was just setting a new baseline basically with that new chest movement, and I got better at it over time. My quality was on point. Loads are starting to go up a little bit. Reps gone up a little bit here and there. So the volume was going up after the baseline was reset. If that makes sense. So those adjustments, like exercise selection, in my opinion, is really important. Like the deeper we get into prep, like some of these, like obviously back squatting, things like that, that's going to get more and more challenging. The leaner you get. Like I just remember like some of my preps putting getting under a squat bar. I'm like, this is terrible. This feels horrible. So this time around, it's like, okay, let me lean on leg press more. Let me lean on leg extensions. Let me lean on like hack squats, that type of thing. So it's just because it's less burdensome and it's easier to recover from. And again, it's all about balancing out supply and demand. I think a lot of people when they're prepping, they think it should feel hard. Like they almost like they want it to feel hard because they think they're progressing, but it's almost kind of the opposite. You don't want to feel like you're dying, or it's just challenging to do everything.
Mm. This is coming from 34 years of bodybuilding, guys, longer than most people listening to this have been alive. This is experience, so I hope a lot of people who are listening to this are able to take away some great notes from what Jeff is saying and his experience over the years. Now, when it comes to, let's say, balance, right, it has its place in regards to the off season, in regards to a contest prep. What are some takeaway points you may have for people listening or athletes in regards to managing their personal life with a contest prep? Because if you're in a contest prep, a lot of people, I experienced this too. Like when I was in the final stages of my contest prep, like I was selfish. Like I was really focused on improvement and I just had my blinders on. And, part of this too is like learning through experience. For me personally, I am still learning. I learn every single day, like big picture of things. It's going to help me in my future preps because of that experience. But, Jeff, mic's all yours.
Man, I'm out of coffee, so hopefully I can answer that pretty well. But no, seriously, I think so. Yeah, let's talk about balance here. So that word balance, like I know there's some bodybuilders like that are pretty hardcore, and they go, that doesn't exist. If you want to get shredded or you want to be the best bodybuilder, like you're gonna have to sacrifice, and that's just how it is. And that's, I would say, personally speaking, that's my mentality was like back in the day. But what I realized over time and through experience is that I don't have to sacrifice everything to be my best. Like I can definitely try to balance that out, but there will be sacrifice. Like even this last prep, I'm like you, I'm still learning. I'm 34 years into this, and I don't know everything there is to know about bodybuilding. I don't know everything there is to know about myself yet. So we're always going to like make mistakes, and the difference between making like someone who makes mistakes that chooses not to learn from them, they're stubborn and they just keep fuck it, hey, this is what bodybuilding is, I'm gonna keep doing it. Like it's like you're shooting yourself in the foot if you're staying in that mindset. So for me, I always try to just kind of keep my mind open and learn from the goods I do and also the bads. More importantly, the bads, because that's where you're going to learn the most. But as far as balance, like I don't think there will ever be a perfect prep for me where I'm perfect in balancing out bodybuilding and life. If you think the reality is if we're dieting, we're getting super lean, we can be aware of it. Like that's why I definitely try to, let my athletes know is be aware of how you're feeling. Don't take it. Don't take your grumpiness or anything like that out on your family. Be aware. Put a smile on your face. Leave notes for your wife. Whatever. Like, but the reality is that even if we're aware and we're trying to be happy, you're not going to be your true self. Like my wife even said, like 2 weeks after this one, or actually a week later, she's like, "Oh, it's good to see you smiling again." So right there, I already knew, like, okay, yeah. There's more work to be done. Like I need to improve even more on trying to be balanced. But I don't think it's perfect. Like it's never going to be perfect, but it could definitely improve. And that's just in general with anything we do in life, right? Like perfection doesn't exist, but we can strive for it. So that's kind of like my thing with balance. So I think if you're one who's like in the mindset of I need to be hardcore and be selfish, like this is just I have to do it and it's okay. No, it's not okay. Like you can improve that. And on the flip side, if you're too chill, like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, my wife wants me to have dinner tonight, I'm gonna have dinner, forget the macros today. It's okay if I just cheat today. Like, no, you can't be that, Lucy. It can't be that extreme. It has to be, somewhere in the middle. And that's like bodybuilding in general, right? Usually if we're working in the middle on something, that's where we need to be versus this extremism from one end to the other end. So I like to think of bodybuilding as a dimmer switch. Like there's moments where you need to turn it up and have like a bright light, and there's moments when you need to turn it down. And that's basically what I try to do with my prep. Like it's like for example, I went to Mexico on a family vacation during prep. Of course, I'm like,
water jugs.
Yeah, it's like, okay, it's like, should I be the hardcore bodybuilder and tell my wife and my kids, no, I'm not going. I'm prepping. I can't go on vacation. No, they're like, okay, I'm gonna go, and then am I gonna go into the gym every day for 2 or 3 hours and get my training in while they're on the beach doing, having fun? No. So it's like, okay, I'm just gonna, what can I do in this situation to try to kind of blend both worlds? So yeah, it was waking up in the morning while my son's watching cartoons, filling a 5-gallon water jug with water and work out with a water jug, let's get some training in. And I also knew too, like, okay, science tells me 3 to 30 reps will create hypertrophy. So I'm like, okay, with a water jug, I know I'm not going to be lifting heavy. It's lighter. So, hey, let me just, maybe do an extra set to get a little more volume in there and cover my bases. Or, hey, let me go to failure because it's higher reps. So let me make sure I am tapping into all muscle fiber types and getting a decent quality workout. And it got the job done. I was able to do both. So it's things like that. That's kind of like the balance. Like if it was Jeff 20 years ago and it was a family vacation on a prep, I would have been like, I ain't going, or no, or I would have been like, no, I'm going to the gym for 2 or 3 hours and getting it in and making everybody outside of myself cater to me versus the other way around. So if you think about it too, so let's say you're a dick through your entire prep, right? Everything's about you. Like, I can almost guarantee that you're going to be dealing with the aftermath of that after the prep's over. And what you don't see on social media, like a lot of times what you see on social media is like, hey, Jeff shredded, or, hey, that's cool. Hey, look at my first place trophy, hardcore, right? So everybody's clapping on social media. But those you love, if you're an asshole, they ain't clapping. But of course, we're not going to post up, hey, I'm arguing with my wife, 4 months post show, still arguing about how I was during prep, and your relationships are suffering because of it. So that's the stuff that I think people need to hear a lot more, is realize that we're human. And, that the content that you get across the board, it's great. Yeah, it's all about optimality. But again, I keep saying this over and over, we're not in a controlled lab. We're humans. And there's a lot more to bodybuilding besides just, hey, I need to do a 3x10 with perfect form. I need to have the most development by 2021 or whatever. It's like how you integrate all this with real life. It can really affect not only us as humans, but affect those you love. And I think the last thing we want to do is, have a shitty life outside the gym. I know personally for me, when my life is kind of functioning really well outside the gym, like there's a lot of harmony there, my training is a lot better because my stress levels are low, and I can enjoy things a lot more. Whereas in my past, it always wasn't the case. It was more like I was that hardcore bodybuilder where the gym was first, everything else was second. And yeah, I had those preps where they were good preps, but afterwards it was like, oh shit, now I got to deal with all this stuff. I got to deal with the relationships. I got to patch these things up. And yeah, it's just not the funnest thing in the world. So
if life stress is low, guys, you can induce more stress through your training, which means more progress over the long haul. And what I really loved about what you said, Jeff, is how people need to view contest prep or intensity, for example, like just in general intensity, not training intensity, as a switch, as a dimmer, right? There are times where you really turn it up. There are times you really turn it down. Specifically, in regards to nutrition, one thing that I really loved about you when you were prepping this year is that you determined the days where you really need to dig and the days where you felt like shit, your recovery was kind of not there. You gave yourself, and hunger was high because you're dieting. You were dieting for like a year. You gave yourself a range to hit your macros within.
So I guess let me preface that with, like the way I prep nowadays is more, I consider more like lifestyle prep versus like traditional, like, okay, I have 20 weeks, I gotta go hard this whole time. So usually when I start my preps, it's like there's plenty of time involved, right? Like it's more open-ended. Like I don't select shows until I get closer to when I'm ready. That get like right there, that approach. So think of it this way. If I tell you, Ishak, I need you to tie your shoes, man, but I'm going to give you 10 seconds to tie both shoes. Like, you might get that done, but think of like the process. Like, you would have to be like really fast. And you may or may not have like perfect tied shoes after that. You might, but you might not. So your quality won't be all that great, maybe, because you're rushing that process. But I said, hey, Ishak, I give you 30 seconds, tie both shoes. You're going to be chill through the process, right? So it's the same concept when I go to prep. I want to have plenty of time to go through the process with the least amount of stress as possible. And time is usually the most important aspect of a prep, because that can really affect how the process and the trajectory. So for me, that's like the big picture concept. So with that context in mind, if let's say, I have, let's say it's 2 months before a show, it's let's say day 4 out of day 5 of low days, and I'm feeling just terrible. Let's say, I'm hunger levels are like 11 out of 10, energy levels really terrible. I'm lethargic. Like I'm okay with saying, all right, let me eat on my high side of my calorie range today, versus the low side. So it's not a good time for me to dig, because if I dig, let's say, even harder that day on the low side, well, day 5 out of day 5 of my low days is going to be even worse if you think about it, right? It's just going to compound it. So I'm like, let me just eat on the high side today. And maybe that might even be a day where I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm probably not going to train. Or if I do train, maybe it's like a little bit less intense session. So that way I don't escalate fatigue levels. So that way day 5, when I get up, I'm not trashed. I'm like, I'm decent. I can get through day 5 pretty well, still make some progress. But there's times though too, like on the flip side, where if I'm closer to it, so this is why context is so important. Like let's say I'm closer to a show, like Mayhem, like it was about 2 weeks out. I needed to grind a little bit harder because I was a little bit behind as far as conditioning where I wanted to be for that show, and I really wanted to get to that show to step on Sam's toes. So yeah, there was like I did less refeeding those 2 weeks ahead of time, and there was days where I was like super tired. Like it was my stepdaughter's 15-year-old party, and it was a huge party we were throwing, and I had to carry these like big tables, like I would say like 100 yards. We had like 12 of them to do, and man, it was a low calorie day. It was just my 6th one in a row, and I was like, I have to just grind here. I just have to, because I got to get that progress. But I had a refeed the next day, and it was a large refeed because again, demand was really elevated from that. So I just, okay, let me eat even more today on this refeed day. So that's basically what I like to do as far as, having those ranges for calories and auto-regulating, where I see fit as far as like what's going to either make progress for me or, hey, what's going to keep overall demand from getting out of control.
Great points. Context is everything, guys. And the context of your situation will better allow you to integrate a lot of these principles as part of your life. And remember, big picture, like science is there to help guide us in our decision-making process. It's not there to stress us out. And the true meaning of bodybuilding is more than just bodybuilding. I've learned so many valuable lessons over the years, both mentally and physically, when it comes to bodybuilding. Discipline, patience, delayed gratification, persistence, the ability and intestinal fortitude to really put my head down and work when I set a goal out for myself. Jeff, do you have any important points to touch on in regards to maybe some of the valuable lessons you've learned from bodybuilding over the years?
I need more coffee, man.
I know, me too.
No, I would say that I think when it all comes down to it, like, I mean, a lot of, like, usually when I do podcasts, a lot of people want to talk about my longevity, how do we sustain? And for me personally, what I realized, like, especially the last 10 years is if you do things practical, according to your life, if it's practical and you enjoy it, that means you're going to sustain. So even if, let's say, like some things I might be doing maybe aren't, let's say on paper, optimal or according to science, like, oh shit, Jeff's being bro. Like this past week of my training was bro. Like I did chest and arms on Monday, legs on Wednesday, and back and shoulders yesterday on Friday. So it's like, oh, okay, we're only hitting each body part once per week. What's going on there? That's not, we know through the research we should be hitting like 2 or 3 times, per week. But again, it's like, okay, I know if this week, if I was to train more than I did, my fatigue levels would be like way up here because of everything that I got going on in my world. So the way I'm structuring myself now, like right now in the moment, is bro split 1 week, and then hey, let's do upper lower twice per week next week. So I'm training, hitting each body part twice. So if I stretch it out like over time, now I'm hitting every body part once every 4 days or something like that, which I'm not going to see atrophy. I'm still training. Like again, stop training, you'll see atrophy, but I'm training and I'm improving. I'm balancing out supply and demand. And most importantly is I'm having fun doing it.
Yes.
Right? I'm enjoying my training. I'm improving. Like if I'm having fun, I know I don't have Eric here to back me up, but I'm pretty confident there's some research out there that says if you're enjoying something, motivation level is going to be higher and you're going to get after it. So let's say I was forcing myself to hit full body training 4 times per week because I want to get more volume and frequency in there. But my fatigue levels are escalated now. I'm not recovering too well. My joints are achy, blah, blah, blah. And I'm fucking miserable. Like I'm hating life now. I'm tired and cranky, and my wife hates me now because I'm tired and cranky. But hey, I'm all about the gains, right? You're not like eventually your motivation is going to diminish because you're just going to feel like shit. So if you force yourself to keep with that, what do you think is going to end up happening? One, you're either going to start plummeting as far as performance in recovery if you keep doing it, or 2, you're just burned out. You're going to get burned out, and you're going to hate it. So to me, it's like I've learned over time, like, okay, yeah, I need to do things that I enjoy as long as it's safe, obviously, because I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to sustain. And so 34 years into this, I'm still sustaining and still making progress. So practicality leads to sustainability.
Is everything. Guys, we've been talking a lot about bodybuilding and training, and like the same thing could be said for your nutrition. So like it should be common sense. If you are completely abstaining from a certain food that you literally like, you love it, you enjoy it, how long do you think you'll be able to abstain from that before just, the wheels fall off the wagon and you end up either binging or you end up developing an eating disorder or something more serious? You know what I mean? If you had, let's say, a serving or 2 of some ice cream to cap off your macros for the night, big picture of things, is that going to help you better adhere to things? Is that going to help you be able to sustain it long term? Like that's the most important thing you have to take into account.
Word. I like ice cream, man. Like my 2014 prep every day, the last meal in front of the TV with my feet up with my wife next to me. I was having ice cream every day. I was the ice cream man back then.
The ice cream man. Right now, what's your to-go-to right now? What have you been really enjoying in regards to food?
Off season?
Yeah.
Everything. Last night I was like, okay, we went to the Stockton Kings game, the G League basketball. So I had my nachos there. Of course I had diet soda with nachos. You have to have diet soda, right?
Ooh.
So yeah, and then when I got home, I'm like, okay, I need some protein shake, and my wife bought these chocolate chip muffins. I'm like, okay, let me have one of those. So we pounded that down. But yeah, I'm just right now enjoying life. Like I'm not tracking macros, but I'm doing practical things, right? I'm like, okay, I'm making sure I'm getting at least 1 gram of protein in per pound. And I'm eating, still eating 3 or 4 meals. So I'm getting, enough carbs and obviously enough fats in there. And I'm more so just kind of monitoring like my body weight more so than tracking macros. So I know if my body weight isn't escalating too high, then I'm okay. And if on the flip side, if I'm seeing myself dropping on the scale a little bit, then I know, okay, I need to eat a little more food. And like I said, I'm just managing out the supply and demand with my training. Like right now, I'm intent on getting my lifts, worked back up, because obviously coming off prep, your loads are going to be down. So I'm like, okay, let me get the strength level back up. So that's what I'm working on right now. And I know because that is a demanding way of training, like increasing loads pretty frequently, that, yeah, I need those rest days. Those rest days are so valuable because if I know myself personally, if I train more than 2 days in a row, I'm good for nothing. So right now it's every other day. Then I flip it 2 days on, take a day off, 2 days on, take a day off, and then I flip it around again. And so that's basically kind of like, yeah, I'm just kind of just looking big picture and not worrying so much on these little minutia details that I know really isn't going to do anything for me other than just create more stress in my life. And again, when it comes down to bodybuilding and your own approach, if you're having fun with it, then the approach is good. If not, if you're stressed, the approach needs to change. And that might mean it goes against the grain as far as what's quote unquote optimal.
Facts. Nice, man. Great points. Do you have any monsters prepping for 2020?
Do I have any what?
You have any athletes, any freaks who are prepping for 2020?
Oh man, well, yeah, but I don't want to say because I don't know if he's announced it yet. So
okay.
Let's just say I'll just say
I think we both know
it's someone I've prepped before in the past. And he's pretty much a phenom. So that's pretty exciting. Yeah, he's more of one of those genetically gifted, but one of the hardest workers I've ever seen. Because I know a lot of times when we see people with genetics, we don't give enough credit to the work ethic that goes along with it. But also I have some other athletes that I have on my roster that work just as hard, if not harder. They just obviously aren't as genetically gifted. But when it comes down to the sport of body, that's probably another podcast. But I mean, when we're on stage, it's like, yeah, the judges compare people, but it's really you versus you. So sometimes you may not look as good as the person to your left or right, but you can be a better bodybuilder if you're fulfilling your potential too, and the other person isn't, even though they look better than you. So again, that makes sense. That's my famous line, right? If that makes sense. Another cup of coffee would make perfect sense.
100%. Great points, man. It's a journey of you versus you. I don't want to keep you too long. I know we're a little bit short on time right now, but I want to thank you for coming on to the podcast. I genuinely appreciate it. Thank you again for everything over the years. Do you have any, take-home points you have for the audience or any things Team 3DMJ has coming up for 2020?
We do have some things coming up, but I'm going to keep it on the down low. But just if you want to keep following my practical thoughts, you could just go on 3DMJ Godfather on Instagram and then 3dmusclejourney.com.
Thank you for coming on, Jeff. I genuinely appreciate it. Thanks for watching, guys.